Hello and welcome to ISACA podcast. Thank you for joining me for this episode. My name is Hollee Mangrum-Willis, and I am a senior program manager for ISACA's foundation, One in Tech. Joining me today, I am honored to have Jai Sisodia, IT and Information Security Audit Vice President. Thank you for joining me. How are you today?
Thanks a lot, Holly, for inviting me and for this great opportunity. I'm doing good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Now, before I allow you to introduce yourself, I just want to make sure that that our ISACA audience knows exactly who you are. So, JC Sodia wrote a recent article entitled "AI Risks and the Role of IT Auditors," and this was an article that came out when last year.
Yep,
Last year, December 2022.
you're right.
Okay, so before I ask you, before we get into the meat of the article and pick out some finer points in this podcast episode, please tell our audience a little bit about yourself and basically your journey to this AI crusade, if we shall.
Yeah, for sure. Hello everyone. This is Jai Sisodia. As Holly mentioned, I'm currently working as a vice president of IT and Information Security Audit at Oak North Bank. I'm a career IT auditor. So from the start of my job, I have been around 9 years of experience completely in IT audit. Have been exposed to multiple industries from Big Four consulting from in Deloitte and then moving to Baxter Healthcare in Chicago, Illinois. I worked in Baxter for around five and a half years. Got exposed to a lot of audits, auditing in manufacturing plants to IT and looking at application systems, information security, privacy, anything and everything that you can talk about in IT and InfoSec. I have done that from an IT audit perspective. That's what I believe. And now this is my first day at Oak North and working in the fintech industry for the first time. So yeah, like I said, I'm a career IT auditor. So I've done the good thing about IT audit is that it exposes you to a multiple fields, like not only the field, the things that the companies are working at right now, but also what their strategy is going forward. So that's where I got exposed to the world of AI, right? Everybody, every company, everyone wants to embrace AI. And now that with these large language models like ChatGPT coming in, everybody wants to see what's the potential here and how we can further use it or utilize it to further increase our productivity or better offer services to their customers, right? But as IT auditors, we have to put on that hat, right, and think about the risk. And that's where I got attracted to this particular area of how as we as IT auditors can add value to this whole AI revolution that's currently going on in the world. And that's where I believe I just started researching about it, got a lot of information and thought of just jotting it down and into a summary. And that's how I'll go about it, this article in ISACA.
This is interesting. Now, I have to say, Jay, you're taking the fun out of AI. You're taking all the fun out of it because, I think for me, it became a real thing maybe a few months ago when
Yeah,
everyone on social media went on some website and uploaded their image, their personal image, and then it created, tens or 30 or 40 different
right,
photos that a photographer did not take. And they all look
right.
like you, right? But now
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
taking the fun out of it because, we're thinking about risk, we're thinking about audit, we're thinking about the security of it all, which is
yeah.
extremely important here, right?
Mhm.
And so
Right.
I wanted to know, you talked a little bit about your career journey, but on a personal level, what drove you to really dig in to this concept of securing and understanding the risks behind artificial intelligence?
Yeah. So, like I said, right, in my previous roles and being exposed to this IT audit world, I've traveled to around 30 plus countries, and every country has. So, when you go land at the airport, Some countries have a manual process. Some countries have automated systems, right? For example, I've been to China multiple times, and they have their whole facial recognition system through which they can recognize you and then your characteristics, and then they let you into the country. And that's got me thinking, right? Because sometimes what happens is these systems fail to recognize you because you are not being your data is not fed because you are one of the rare people that comes to that country, right? You are the outliers. So it gets you thinking, right? About the risk, about what actually these biases, these unintentional biases can lead to. And that's where this is like my personal thing, and this is one of the inputs, or this is one of the very major factors that got me into this particular field, and I started researching about it. That if you travel, if you are exposed to, what if these systems, whatever we are trusting so blindly, a lot of people are trusting so blindly, what if they start churning out wrong data? Or what if they start making wrong decisions for us and we are just trusting them blindly, right? So it's good. It's like you rightly said, AI is fun, AI is productive, AI is everything that we can think about in a positive front. But obviously, with risk, with returns come risk, right? And that's where we as IT auditors come in, I guess.
Okay, I totally understand it, but I think I grew up dancing, and my dance teacher used to
Mhm.
say the fun is in the discipline
Right.
is in the fun, and so thank you for sharing that answer because what I took from that was if we put some security and mitigate risk within
Mhm.
AI, we can continue to use it for good, to have fun with
Yeah,
it, and to do positive things and to allow it to continue to have positive impact in the world.
definitely. And we also have to change our mindset, right? We as I consider myself as a tech nerd, and but even I or people like me in this field have to change our mindset. AI or the risk of AI are not technological in nature, right? They are socio-technological. We have to consider the social and economical impacts that AI has, and we as IT auditors now have to elevate ourselves, elevate our skills to the next level so that we can better help whatever organization that we are working for or providing services to. It We have to make sure that we are assessing these AI related risks as a socio technological challenge, not just as a technical or a technology.
Oh, you're getting deep real early in this, Jay. You know what? We're going to put a pin in that social technology. We're going to come back to that later because I think you
Yeah.
touched on something incredible right there. So, please share with me because I asked about the personal side of it. Why did you write this article? Why was it important for you to get this out, get it out to the ISACA community?
Right. So one of the things that I've already told you, right? The personal reasons that got me attracted to this field, but this socio-technological challenge that I was talking about, if I can just elaborate on that a little bit more. While researching for this article or while researching for this topical last year, I got to know about some of the studies that were done. Right, one of them was around 65% of the companies that are using AI models. So AI is not a new technology; it has been hyped right now, but it's like a 60, 70 years old technology. Right?
60 or
AI,
70-year technology? Now,
the
I fully
first
expected you to say 30, but 60 or 70 years?
first AI code was written around 60 years back.
Wow. You
Yeah.
taught me something today, sir. Thank you. But okay, but what was the first AI code? Like, what does that look like 60 years ago? Because I mean, we're talking about what, 1960 some
Yeah.
odd, 70 some odd?
Yeah. So it was around, I think, if I remember correctly, around 1950s, 1960s, there was research going on, I think in Stanford or somewhere, where they were. So, first code, obviously, it's not like the language models of today, but
Yeah,
it
of
was
course.
making decisions based on the data that it was fed to it. So, they were making decisions based on the historical data and just predicting what's the next letter is going to be.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so very rudimentary, but to the point, not new.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. AI is not a new technology. So it has been used in, for example, in Google, in other companies as well for a very long time. And one of the recent studies that got to know was that 65% of the companies don't know how the AI models that they're using, how do they actually work, right? How they are not, they do themselves don't know. They build themselves the algorithms, but it has been in the outer world for so long time. So they don't know how exactly they are taking the decisions right now. And that's 65%. It's a pretty huge number, right?
That's very large. Thank you
Yes,
for sharing that data. So, okay, what you talked about some of the risks, but can you describe the three main categories of bias that
right.
AI applications are prone to?
Yeah, correct. Before I go to that, probably we
Sure.
can talk about bias in the AI context, right? What is
Okay.
bias in the context of AI? Bias in the human world is someone favoring something or someone, and it which leads to unfavorable or unfair outcomes. This is what bias is for you and me, right? If somebody favors something unfavorably, and it's a discriminatory thing. Similarly in AI, right? AI is not taking decisions based on themselves. It's kind of mimicking how humans take decisions, right? It's taking decisions based on what data is fed to them and what logic it applies to take that data, right? To give that data. So that's where the bias comes in. And bias in AI context, similarly to what is happens in the human context, is these are systemic errors in the decision making or the predictions that are made by these systems, which leads to unfair or discriminatory outcomes, right? So these are the systemic errors. So now, if we there are different kinds of biases, like the how what data are you feeding into it, how developers have coded it, who is in the development team actually coding, who are developing that logic, right? And then how are you interpreting those kind of decisions that the AI systems is taking for you? So all these biases, there's a I think I've read about for around 30 to 40 different kind of biases. So I looked at the frameworks that how we can make sense of all these biases. And NIST 1270 is a very good framework that I got to look at during my research. And
What's the name of that again?
NIST 1270.
NIST 1270. All right. I just want to
Yes.
make sure that our audience caught that because I mean it's a great resource and reference.
Yes, exactly. And there are other resources as well. So European Commission has released some good guidance on AI as well. And there is ISO 27701, which also talks about ethics in AI. So there are some good frameworks that are now available to us to start looking at, start understanding it, things, how the governments are looking at it and how the industry is looking at it, right? Now, coming back to your question about bias, making sense of those 30 to 40 bias, NIST categorized them into three different categories. One, the first one they talked about was the systemic bias, right? This is also known as historical bias, right? This is the bias that we understand. So basically, the data that you're feeding into the system, how truly it reflects, how it reflects the societal biases that are already available. This is the systemic biases that we need to take care of when we are developing these systems, right? So the data that you are choosing to train the AI system, how relevant it is, how true it is to the actual problem it is trying to address, how fair it is to the broader audience that it is going to cater to. This is what we have to understand from a systemic bias perspective, right? The second category around statistical and computational bias. This is the second category of it. This again talks about the sampling or the inputs that are being given to. So once we have selected the data that's or the data set that is going to be fed into the system, now we have to select the sample of that data which is going to be get input into the AI system. We need to make sure that it represents the population or it represents a true population that we are trying to address by building those math models, right? So that's the statistical bias. And then the computational bias is the algorithms that you are developing to make sense of that data. So the developers who we have to make sure that the developers also have their own thinking, right? So they're not trying whatever biases or the upbringing or whatever exposure that they have had, the experiences that they have had to the world, those are not unfairly reflected into the algorithms that they are developing into the AI systems, right? So the algorithms that are being created are not biased and again are fair to the whole audience or to the target customers. This is the statistical computational bias. Am I making sense? If you have any
Yeah,
questions.
no, it makes sense. So in my head, what because I understand that they were classified into three separate types of biases. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, in my head, it seems like they feed into one another, right? It starts
Yes,
with a
definitely.
basic systemic bias that we as humans contain,
Yeah,
and then we are the ones who drive the statistical and computational
exactly.
processes that for
Uh-huh.
the AI. And so
Right.
what you're saying is that we need to in my mind, we need to focus on addressing the systemic portions, and
Mm-hmm.
then in addressing the systemic portions of bias, no matter where you are in the globe, because systemic
Mm-hmm.
bias could mean something different to someone in China than it does in Australia, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
whatever that bias means to you, but understanding how to ethically and morally
Mm-hmm.
account for that so that your statistics and computations are as representative as possible.
Exactly. And one of the very simple examples to understand it is, if you remember I believe in 2009 or 2010, there was a article. Nikon had recently developed a blink detection feature, right?
Okay.
And unintentionally it was not able to detect the eye blink of Asian people because of the nature. So it's not an intentional thing that they built in, but the data that they fed, because it's an American company, they did not have the larger data set to cater to, so the system was not able to identify the blinks. So
Yep.
these kind of things, so the data that you're feeding, you have to take utmost care so that you are able to, because this can not only lead to unproductive outcomes or discriminatory outcomes, but it can also have an effect on the image of the company, right? That they're not catering
Mm,
to their audiences. So we
absolutely.
have to think of it as in a much more broader sense. Like we now think about security, information security, that it can directly disrupt the image of the company or whatever. But
Mhm.
here itself, we have to think about AI in a similar sense, or maybe in a much more impactful sense than in security. So yeah, so this is one of the things, right?
And so you know what, and that leads me back to what you said earlier
Mm-hmm.
about social technology, because a lot of times we're looking at technology as this, black or white thing. Either it is or it
Mm-hmm.
isn't. Either it works or it doesn't. And for
Correct.
so long, we have kind of put the social responsibility of
Mm-hmm.
technology on the back burner. And so
Yep.
now I think, one of the positive things about AI is that it has highlighted the need for more ethical and ethical restraint. I don't know if that's a good phrase, a turn of phrase, ethical restraint, or more attention to
Yeah.
bias, right?
Yeah. I think these AI systems are making people accountable or company accountable.
Yes, accountability. You hit the nail on the head, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So exactly, you're completely right. So now as IT auditors, we have to think not just in technology, whether the algorithms are built in correct, or whether we are able to, how do we assess whether the data set is correct or not, right? So we cannot just rely on looking at some technology, whether what tools are you using, is it secure enough, or does it have all the security related risk covered or technological related risk covered. We have to expert more, increase our skills, elevate our skills, like I said before, but also include ourselves or include other stakeholders who are subject matter experts in those specific fields and get their point of view. So we have to deal this situation by not being in silos, but taking this challenge as a team, as a community, as a whole, and then coming up with these innovative solutions, right? Because to tackle AI, we have to do that. There's no other option.
You're absolutely right. And if I may, because I am a proponent and a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
But typically when I'm hosting or facilitating webinars and other learnings,
Hmm.
DEI has become such a buzzword and a buzz acronym, right? But
Yeah.
basically, what you were talking about is equity and inclusion. It's being
Yep.
inclusive in the data set. I have said this on a ISACA podcast before, but
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
reminds me of the hand washing radar sensors when they first
Hmm.
came out, the automated sensors. When they first
Right.
came out, I remember everyone in my community complaining like those things never work. Well, come to find out, whomever put the sensor together was not made for melanated skin. And all the
Wow.
people who tested the technology did not
Yeah.
have very melanated
And
skin.
this is what I'm talking about, Ollie.
And so
Exactly. Yeah.
something that was meant for good, something that was
Right.
meant to help people, to aid people, to keep people
Hmm.
from touching things. Now we can't
Yeah.
even wash our hands if you have so much more melanin, right?
Exactly. So
Yep.
the trust into these systems is very important, and there are a lot of frameworks, and every framework comes back to, I think, 4 or 5 trust principles, right? Whether the system is fair enough, whether it's transparent enough, does it cater to accountability that we talked about quite a lot today. So is there accountability, and then is it explainable enough? So I was talking about, right, 65% companies don't know how it works. We should be able to explain how the technology that we built works, right? So we have to have access to the metadata that's getting fed into these systems. We have to make sure that they are transparent enough. So these large language models like ChatGPT, actually I asked ChatGPT, like, what are your top 5 risks? Tell me about it. So the 5 risks that it came up was, the first one was bias. People, the data that I give you may be biased, or it may actually be inaccurate. Second was that people are over relying on me, but they should not rely on me. They should do their checks themselves. I'm just a helper. Then the security and privacy risk was number 4 and 5. So the
I'm
first
sorry,
three risks
security and
was
what? Okay.
privacy risk.
Mhm.
So because it does not have consent, right? ChatGPT does not have a consent on what data it is being read. Yeah, because it's just scraping the whole internet. It's not
Right.
taking permission from you and me to whether I can get the data from whatever data that you might have written some blog or might have written some article. It's getting scraped into the data, the whole internet, and now it's bringing up results for the population to see, right? So security and privacy risk are not being considered. So these are the top 5 risks that chat gpt itself is saying, and top 3 risks are related to ethics and bias. So we have to
Mhm.
make sure that before we address the technological things, we come up with certain standards, frameworks to deal, or come up with certain principles that's on which these systems can now be built, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, talk to me. So you're talking about systems, principles that responsible AI can be built on. Talk to me a little bit. You mentioned in the article about this AI life cycle
Mm-hmm.
to address and identify biases. Can you expound upon that a
Right.
little bit more?
Yeah. So it's like any other development, right? The software development, we come up with certain requirements, and which are then it goes into a design phase, and you start coding it, and then it is released into the world, right? So similarly, you might have heard like privacy by design or security by design.
Yes, yes.
Incorporating AI related principles into each and every stage of software development, even for to make sure that we are addressing the problem of ethics and bias from the very beginning, is what it is in
Yes.
summary, right? So again, to make sense of it, NIST framework talks about 3 to 4 stages, which starts with the pre-design phase, where we have to take care of the biases around whether why what's the purpose of the tool that we are building, what's AI within that tool, what specific purpose is it going to solve, then how are we going to select the data. So basically the principles or the standards on which the development is going to happen, needs to be taken care of in the pre-design phase. Now comes the design phase, right? Now here we are actually starting to feed the data into the system, design and development, right? This is where the coding or the algorithms are designed. So the sampling methodology, are we sampling the whole population? Is our sample truly reflects the whole population of the data? What algorithms are being designed, who is in the development team? You talked about diversity, right? The development team has to be as diverse as possible, because without that we cannot build in make those principles within the AI system. It otherwise it will start reflecting those biases. So yeah, taking care of those kind of design and development things. Then the deployment phase, right? Every system in the design phase is fed a test data, but what happens, how it starts reacting when it's actually fed live data? For example, criminal prediction systems, crime prediction systems, or health prediction systems. If the data that is being fed into is just for one race, and it starts predicting for another race or whatever data, and then it starts creating inaccurate outcomes, right? Because if a application was created for the Western world and I'm using that in India, where we have a different race of people, it will give us inaccurate data, right? Inaccurate outcomes, and then we'll start relying on it. So how it is reacting to the real world is what we have to take care of in the deployment phase, and then making sure that we are continuously monitoring it. Even if there's a need to retrain the system at some stage, we keep on doing that to make sure that it reflects or it's as unbiased as possible. So these are the four stages that were defined in NIST framework, and I think it makes sense and how it tackles the biases.
Jay, thank you so much for sharing those insights. And yes, one thing I would like to highlight that you said that really is near and dear to my heart and near and dear to my work with One in Tech and She Leads Tech is the need for diverse teams, right?
Definitely.
Like you can't have unbiased AI if you don't have a full representation or a diverse group of people to draw that knowledge from. And really, if I may, if I may, to me, it sounds like what you're boiling down to is digital trust.
It is.
Like the more that we have ourselves represented in our digital world, the
Yes,
more we can trust it, right?
definitely.
So go ahead.
No, no, you're right. You're right. These digital trust, the way we are getting transparent, it has to be coming back to the same question, same principles, right? The fairness and transparency. This is the must for AI system, right? Because at the end, what technology is it if we are not able to trust it, right? It's meant to be trusted, and without diversity, it cannot be done. That. Yeah, we cannot do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? That is an excellent note to end on. I could talk to you for another hour about this because it is, artificial intelligence is extremely intriguing because now we're seeing the lengths that the potential that it has, right?
Yeah.
But it makes people, I can tell you, people get scared. They're like, okay, if we have the potential for computers to sort of think for us with such an accuracy, you can already see like all the old sci-fi movies playing out
Correct.
and the perils that can come from that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that your article is timely. It is needed to and it really highlights what you said, which is talking about bias, ethics, and instilling that into AI at the outset
Yeah.
instead of trying to control for it later.
Mhm.
Once the train pulls out the station, it's very hard,
Yeah. It's
very hard.
uncontrollable. Correct.
Yeah, to control it. So thank you so very much, Jai Sisodia. I appreciate you for being here. Please make sure you visit ISACA.org to check out his article, which is entitled AI Risks and the Role of IT Auditors. Thank you very much. I hope to speak to you again soon because AI is moving like the speed of lightning. So I know that you'll be back, sir.
Sure, Ollie. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Looking forward to our next section. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining this episode of the ISACA podcast. We appreciate you. Please take care and stay safe.